All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our first Chalk Talk this semester. I'm very excited to kick us off with Clemson's very own Kelley Hester, our women's golf coach, coming off an ACC championship and a great postseason run. And Coach, thank you so much for being here with us and taking some time out of your day. It's nice to see you.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Happy to be here and answer any questions.
I would like to give you, as someone who also does the guest speaker thing, I like to be able to introduce myself, because when people introduce me, it gets longer as you get older. So I'm going to let you share your path, whatever parts of that you want to share with us, because I also think it's neat for our students to hear not every path is the same, right? We all get to certain places in different ways. And so if you could just share a little bit about your story and how you got to Clemson and all that good stuff, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. This is my 8th season at Clemson. So my longest tenure anywhere. I've been fortunate enough to be a head coach at 6 different schools. So my path is a little bit this way, not this way. I played my college golf at the University of Georgia. I'm originally from Georgia, and just always only wanted to be a Bulldog. That was the only thing that was ever in my mind, although I did visit some other universities, but ultimately decided to go to Georgia. Wanted to be a competitive golfer, wanted to play on tour. And my college coach, who I'm still close with, she came to my 50th birthday party this weekend. She encouraged me to coach, which was a really nice way of saying, I'm not sure professional golf is going to be your path, but I still tried it a little bit. And ended up in coaching when I was 24. I was offered the head coaching job at Mercer University in my hometown of Macon, Georgia. There was a player on the team who was older than I was, a master's student. Fortunately, she was very humble and didn't give me too hard of a time about being younger than she was. But from there, I went to Georgia to be the assistant coach for my college coach, Beans. And she really felt like she'd set the table for me to get that head job, even though I was like 26 or so when she retired, 27. I did not get the head job, although I prepared myself for it in an interview, and stayed and worked for a gentleman who they hired. It was really clear to me pretty early on that we were not we coached for different reasons. Now there's words like transactional and transformational for stuff like that. But at the time, I just knew we were in it for different reasons. So I was offered the job at UNLV in Las Vegas to start their women's golf program in 2000. So my husband and I, newlyweds at that time, loaded up our yellow lab and our vehicles, and we drove to Las Vegas, and we were there for 9/11. If you want to know how far you are from home, have something like that happen that shuts the world down for a bit. But we were there for a few years, long enough for me to realize that he was not happy. And so sometimes in your life, you're forced to make a decision for family versus career. I was offered the job at the University of Arkansas, which I know sounds like a great job in the SEC, but at the time they were the bottom of the barrel in the SEC. And having played at Georgia, one of the top teams in the conference, it felt a little bit like career suicide. And maybe I was the only person in the history of the world that moved from Las Vegas, Nevada to Fayetteville, Arkansas. But we actually loved it there, had a lot of success there. And I don't know if any of y'all are golfers, but a girl named Stacy Lewis played for me there. She's just the captain of the U.S. Solheim Cup team, which is like the highest honor in the LPGA, to be asked to be the captain of the Solheim Cup team for the USA. She won a national championship. I had my daughter was 12 weeks old when I was offered the head coaching job at the University of Georgia, which was the only place in the world I thought I ever wanted to coach. So we loaded up at that time, then 2 labs and a 12-week-old baby, and moved to Athens, Georgia, from Fayetteville, Arkansas. And I had a good bit of success there, had a National Player of the Year on my team that I recruited, never ranked outside the top 19 in the country. And at the end of my 5th year, my contract was not renewed. So pretty devastating. I moved there at 34. If you know anything about Georgia football, that was Herschel Walker's number. He was probably the best player to ever play at Georgia. So I just thought it was destiny that I was going to be there forever. And I assume that some of you guys want to have a career in college athletics. So learning to pivot, learning to adjust, and knowing that nothing really necessarily goes according to plans is part of most jobs, but I can only speak to college athletics because that's been most of what my career has been. New AD came in, former AD had a DUI. There was a woman in the car with him who was not his wife. The University of Georgia frowned upon that. He was let go. New guy comes in from the University of Florida, pretty much wanted his own people. I was just not one of them, unfortunately. So at 39, I had to decide like what's next now. I've already had my dream job. So where do you go? As if turning 40 is not hard enough. But long story short, I interviewed at Furman, was offered the job within the week, never missed a paycheck, ended up having some success at Furman. And then the Clemson job came open and interviewed for that. I'm really good at getting jobs. I've been a successful interviewer and person who is able to, if I could get my foot in the door, I could typically talk these people into hiring me. So the Clemson job came open. Part of me actually didn't even want the job because I'd gotten comfortable with my 5-year-old and my role in life and being at little old Furman and helping them be a top 10 team in the country. They seemed easy and comfortable. But Clemson came calling, and now I'm in my 8th year. We just won the I'm an SEC homer. It's hard for me to say ACC. Won the ACC championship and had the best year in the history of the program. Last year was year number 10 here, so still a pretty new program. And so that's my path. We do hope to stay here, but you just quite honestly never know in college athletics. But our desire would be to stay here in Clemson. We love the community and love the university. So yeah, that's it.
Happy belated birthday. I'm sorry we couldn't get to the party. We had company in town, like half the town for the Florida State game. So yeah. I didn't know that you and Coach Gardner had Mercer, Arkansas, and Georgia overlap. Like that's
I know. Isn't that crazy?
Georgia Mercer part, but I didn't know the Arkansas part. So can definitely relate to your point about change in leadership as a head coach and what that can feel like. The same thing happened to us at Florida when Amanda was let go. We had a new AD and he wanted his people too. So so my question to you, this is a leadership degree, right? Is you've been coaching, you just kind of shared your whole path with us for a good while now. How would you describe, and you already mentioned transactional, transformational, how would you describe your coaching leadership style? And also if you could touch on maybe how that's evolved over your career.
Sure. So it's hard for me to talk about my coaching journey and path without talking about my college coach who was just real instrumental in a huge impact on my life. And so going into coaching, all I knew is what she had done. And that was, I'd had other coaches in high school, basketball coaches, track coaches, softball coaches, whatnot. But my college coach was really the first one who really poured into me. And so I think the buzzword at that time was probably more servant leadership, heavily impacted by Pat Summitt, Coach K, Tony Dungy, all coaches that I emulated. And what does that look like? What does it mean? And for me, it was always like, if I asked my student athletes to do something, I was going to be present for it. I was going to be there for it. My role is as, facilitator, to help my players meet their goals, exceed their goals. But there was definitely a part of it, and even as a young coach, that as a servant leader, are you kind of getting stepped on a little bit? And that was always a little uncomfortable for me, because I've never been that this is about me kind of coach. Like it's always been about my players, and I wanted to be the kind of coach that I wanted as a coach when I was a player. So a player's coach, so to speak. And I always felt like I was doing a pretty good job of that. But as I've gotten older, this is now year 26 for me in coaching. I realized that wasn't always where I was. Like I thought it was where I was, but through some feedback and some information from my players, sometimes I would get distracted. Sometimes I was not fully present as a sandwich generationer. I was taking care of my daughter, but I was also taking care of my parents. That's a whole thing that nobody in life prepares you for, in addition to trying to be a wife. And our role as coaches has really changed over time. Over the time that I've been involved, it's become much more time consuming. Like earlier today, I was arranging massages for my student athletes. That was not a thing when I was a student athlete. Our next tournament's going to be on TV. And so they want our 1 and 2 players to wear a certain uniform, and then our 3 and 4 players to wear a certain uniform, and our 5 player to wear a different uniform, and then all 5 players to wear a different hat. So they'll be easily identifiable on the TV for the golf channel. Well, holy cow, like, all right, as if it's not hard enough just to figure out the whole team's going to wear, then I've got to sort of. So anyway, that's just a small picture of NIL, transfer portal, blah, 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 all of it. Like our jobs have changed. And to be honest, it's become a bigger job. So I got a question over there, Nicole.
Yeah, sorry. Are you done answering that last question Jana had?
No, not quite yet, but I'm happy to answer your question.
Yeah. No, if you want to continue, I just wanted to make sure that she knew I was.
Kelley, I can navigate the questions for you. All you have to do is answer.
Okay. All right. Well, then really quickly, then so I felt like I was being a servant leader, but the bigger buzzword at this point in time is probably more humanistic coaching, which sounds like a no-brainer, teaching your student athletes, coaching your student athletes like humans. But what goes along with that is really understanding your own biases. As I've gotten older, I'm further in age from my students. When I was 24 in coaching, it was a little bit easier to relate to an 18 to 22-year-old than it is as a now 50-year-old. I'm 2 days into my 50s. And so I realized that I had some learning and some growing to do there, just to even make me aware of what I wasn't aware of, if that makes any sense. And so I actually took a course this summer on coaching the whole athlete and really understanding who my players are, who I am, why I do what I do, and being more intentional about, because you can tell your players that I care more about you than I do your golf score. But what that involves is on a daily basis, interacting with them about who they are and what's going on in their lives, away from, for us, the golf course. And those conversations don't necessarily happen. You have to be intentional about having them. And so throughout my career, I had done small things, especially if there was an issue or problem, to address some of these. For instance, when I first got to Clemson, the team was in a little bit of an uproar. The girls had gotten the coach fired. Half the team was happy, half the team wasn't happy. So we would do something in practice to try to get everybody on the same page. Let's bring so-and-so to the middle and let's all go around and talk about what we love and appreciate about this person. So I would do it when there was a problem, but I didn't necessarily do it when there weren't problems. Just little things like that. So in an effort to continue to be more present, more aware, and more of a humanistic coach, I've really made an effort to be intentional about having conversations with our players away from the golf course, talking about what's happening in their lives away from the golf course, and asking them more questions than feeling the need to have answers. I think as an experienced coach, you think that your players come to you and they want you to dispense your wisdom upon them. And the longer I do this, the more I understand that usually I just need to ask them some questions to get to the bottom of exactly where they're headed and what they would like to know, so that I can give them a shorter answer as opposed to a longer answer, fewer words of mine and more of theirs. So there's a little bit about my coaching philosophy, and the way that I would like to be perceived as a coach, definitely more hopefully on the transformational side as opposed to the transactional side. So I'm not sure if that fully answered the question, but there's my answer.
No, that was great. I appreciate kind of like where you started to where you are now. And like just even hear someone who's been doing this for, decades now, like you took a class this summer, like you're still learning, you're still trying to figure out, right? You never really know all of it. So I think that's great. We do have some questions, and I have, I'm just going to go with 3 names in a row right now, so we don't get too far down the line, but Nicole, Ben, and then Brandon, y'all had your hands up first, and then I'll come back.
Cool. Well, Kelley, thank you first off for taking the time to meet with us today. I appreciate it. You had spoken to this a little bit, but I think it's really important for young professionals to understand that change doesn't necessarily happen instantly. So you talked about you came here, you said the program was essentially brand new, and now this past year you guys were ACC champions. Can you talk about how you really changed that program to get to the point that it is today, and sort of paint a picture of what it looked like then versus what it looks like now?
Sure. So I got here the 4th year of the program. And as you guys have seen, Clemson likes to start women's sport programs, and we're well resourced when it happens. And there's a lot of fanfare around the start of a new program. So here I was at Furman, little old Furman, the year that Clemson was starting golf. And every kid in the state had a freaking tiger on their golf bag already, with a brand new program. And so the program started out super strong, some top recruits, large personalities had chosen to come here. And within 3 years, those personalities were all individuals on a team, and the kids weren't getting along, and the coach got a little sideways with a few of them, and basically they got him fired. So year 4, those first year players were seniors. So they had helped build the program. They had a lot of pride in the program. But we were very much a dysfunctional unit. And I knew what I was getting into. My reputation in our sport has been somewhat of a fixer, the Olivia Pope, so to speak, of women's college golf. Like, I have been hired into these messes to fix. So here at Furman, the coach had an affair with the president of the university's wife, who she then made her assistant coach, blah, blah, blah. At Georgia, the coach who I left as his assistant got fired for sexual harassment. At Arkansas, it was a very dysfunctional unit when I was hired there. So not on purpose, but I just have that's become a little bit of what my background is. So John Gordon was my go-to author at that time. And he wrote a book called The Energy Bus about getting the right people on the bus and in the right seats. And he has another book called Soup that I thought was really cool about the ingredients of winning, basically. But long story short, I didn't have a team meeting with the whole group together for a month, because I knew that when I put that group of kids together, and you're only talking about 8 people, it's not a big team. that they were gonna, like, one of the girls told me she was gonna punch this other girl. These are golfers. Like, so long story short, I had them basically I met with everybody individually, and I had them promise that we weren't going to focus on the past. As a matter of fact, we weren't even going to talk about the past. And when they walked out my office door, that was symbolic of them leaving the past behind them. And if I caught word of anyone focusing on the past, they were going to be off the team. So we actually made it to the NCAA championship that year for the first time in the history of the program. So somehow, miraculously, it worked. They didn't talk about the past. We were able to come together. And 3 of those girls actually came to my birthday party this weekend, which is kind of funny. But we were dysfunctional, and the goal was to get the group together. I did some other things, like we're just now on player 27 ever to hit a golf shot for Clemson. So I traced it back to the first player who ever hit a shot. I called her player number 1. And then the second player that hit a shot for Clemson women's golf was player number 2. And the third player is player number 3. So I attached a number to each player so they could see where they are in the history of the program and that they're a part of something bigger than themselves. Just little things like that to try to help them see, golf is largely an individual sport. So to coach them like a team, there's some challenges there. And to get this particular group to come together was a little bit miraculous, a lot of prayer involved, and really cool to see people change. Like, I think we think that people aren't capable of change. And I did ask those girls to change. And to be honest, they did it for the good of the group. And that was really powerful. So now we have a group. So starting last year number 10, our group wanted to come up with a set of standards that they could hold each other accountable to. And then they signed off on, and they would check each other if someone was falling short of a standard, which was really cool. So I've never had a team in all my years of coaching choose to come up with a shared set of standards. And then this year's team, which was a lot of people, minus 2 players and adding a new freshman, they didn't want to have standards. They wanted to have family values. They chose to call them family values, which was also really cool. And the words that they came up with were probably things that you guys have studied: vulnerability, having a growth mindset, respecting one another, honesty, gratitude, intentionality in relationships, and love. Those were the words that they chose to use as their family values. And they wanted to do away with the checking because it didn't really work. None of them really had the courage to check someone if they were not communicating, not texting back to the group, or, whatever but these were things that the kids wanted to do. And so I don't think it's by accident that our team has also gotten much better at golf and performed better, because they've learned to be better members of a team. There's certain other buzzwords. Psychological safety, I think, is one that our group did not have 3 years ago. And in the absence of it, they understood the importance of some of these other things so that they could then develop psychological safety. Because that's the only way a group of 8 girls can come up with a list of words like this and agree. So where we've always been in the top 35. We're a good golf team. But last year, to win the ACC championship, what's important to realize is that Wake Forest won the national championship. And they were ranked one of the best teams in the country all year. So we were fortunate at the ACC championship. We actually did not play them in match play. Virginia upset them, and then we beat Virginia in the finals. But we did something that our kids didn't think they were capable of, and that's really cool. But as a coach, it's been a really fun group to work with as well, because we've made these things a priority as a group.
Hey, Kelley. So you talked a little bit about your leadership, and having your team be player led. What is your philosophy on how you create leaders within your team, and how did that contribute to the success this past year?
That's a great question. So I choose not to have team captains. And I know that that sounds a little strange that I don't choose a team captain, but I do feel like leaders rise up within a team, whether they're given a title or not. And sometimes when people are given titles, it takes away permission from others to stand up and be leaders. I've coached teams that freshmen and sophomores were some of the stronger individuals on the team in terms of, desire to serve and, and you just don't ever want anyone to feel like they're not open or available to do those things. So we definitely encourage our older girls to step up in leadership as they come along. And the university, the athletic department has some wonderful opportunities for leadership as well, which I think also helps identify who some of those leaders will be. The girls who choose to partake in the, what is it called, Jana?
Tiger Leadership Academy.
Tiger Leadership Academy, and then the
Power.
women's power. Yeah. So some of the girls that choose to do those things are basically screaming like, I want to be a team leader. And maybe I don't necessarily have the tools and I want to learn. So we do some things within our team to really try to get people more involved. We pair them up so they can mentor one another. We also, I asked the seniors to do certain things like the rising seniors, so the current juniors, design our golf bag for the next year. Just some, I don't know any other teams that do things like that, just to try to get them involved. But I think that it's fun to see who speaks up. Twice a month, we meet with our sports psychologist as a team, and my assistant and I are constantly looking and watching to see who is choosing to speak up and what they're saying and how they're saying it. Last year we had a sophomore who was brand new to our team, who was one of our best leaders, mostly because she has a way about her that she, everyone around her is comfortable. Like, she's able to make everyone around her comfortable. So she could sometimes say uncomfortable things that didn't ruffle feathers. And she didn't even know that was one of her gifts, but those are some of the ways that we really try to encourage student-led, and that's part of me asking them questions. So after our rounds, we started doing this last spring. After our tournament rounds, I used to feel the need to recap or tell the girls what I thought. And rather than do that, all of a sudden I felt a need to ask them what they thought. And it became an opportunity for them to become vulnerable with one another and say something like, I was a little nervous when I started the day and I wasn't quite committing to my golf shots. And I remembered what Corey had said about, focusing on your target, or, I don't know, whatever it is, sticking with my routine. And then it would give another one permission to say, yeah, I know exactly what you mean there. And I was so nervous, but I remembered our breathing that we had worked on. And anyway, that was a really cool opportunity for them to all speak up. And there was one player on our team who just would not become vulnerable. Everything was, I had a bad break, or my putt lipped out, or whatever. And a couple of the girls would come to me after the round and they're like, that's really annoying. She's not holding herself accountable at all, coach. Everything is bad luck. And I'm like, that's annoying, isn't it? And they're like, yeah, can you get her to stop? And I was like, well, I don't know if I can change how she's thinking, but maybe you guys can help her talk through some of that. And we did put some parameters on it. We started saying, let's focus on things that we can control, not things that are outside of our control, like the wind or the bad luck, or the putt slipping out, or, I don't know, whatever it is. And so over time, they've gotten much better at it. And what I've learned is I don't need to say anything. They have answers, and they're able to share that within the team. And that's been really cool.
Hey, Coach. This is Brandon Spector. I play football here at Clemson, and I just know that all sports is very big on mindset, and especially golf. I just wanted to hear what do you do as a head coach to prepare your players to have a great mindset? Like with football, a lot of times it can be tough love, and Coach Sweeney can rip us and get onto us, but obviously you can't do that as a golf coach. So, what do you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. We really preach having a growth mindset as much as possible. So I would say, that comes in the language that we use. You're not really going to be able to choose somebody a new one in golf. It's probably not going to be productive unless someone is just not doing what they need to do. So it's more about their effort. But I would say, part of my coaching philosophy is that I am the thermostat and I need to bring the attitude, energy, and effort that I expect from my players. If they don't have it, I don't need to complain about it. I need to look at myself and see if I'm bringing it as well. So that's more on a practice level, but we're always trying to get them to engage and to be present. And golf is a sport where everyone needs to be at a different intensity level. I would argue that in football, almost everybody needs to be at a 10. Everybody's jacked up, they're fired up, they're running down the hill, they're jumping around, they're bumping chests, and what I learned when I was a college player, my coach operated on a 10. Well, I didn't realize until I turned pro after college that I didn't need to be at a 10. That was anxious energy for me. And I actually needed to figure out how to get myself to a 6 and stay there. And so part of what we work with our kids is what's your optimal level of intensity that you need? And how do we help you get there and stay there over a 4 or 5 hour round of golf? And the answer is that everyone is different. And you can't coach a golf team the same. Every individual is going to require and need something a little different. And some kids do need me to get over and hit them on the shoulder and be like, come on, what are you doing? Get your head on straight. But for some kids, that would totally not work. And so I need to know the difference and whose buttons I can push and how I can push them. And have they given me really permission to get in there and do that during a competitive round of golf? But so you have those conversations about intensity level outside of competition in order to help them figure it out. And then you check in with them during the round, hey, how you doing? Where are you feeling? You look a little anxious. You look like you have a little extra energy. I have one player who will get on a stationary bike and bike 4 miles in the morning before we go to breakfast because she's too amped up and she's got to figure out how to get her energy level down a little bit in order to sustain it through a 4 or 5 hour round of golf. So I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but we have a lot of conversations away from tournament conditions in order to try to help them figure out what works best for them.
I had a sports psychologist once describe that as your hype number. What's your hype number, 1 through 10? Because I would be I want the same songs every time. I'm gonna do the same routine before every game. That's how and then I had teammates who would be jumping off the walls, loud music, so it was he described it as the hype number. We're gonna go Andrew, Austin, then Alden.
Hey, Jana, one thing real quick to that. So as I've evolved as a coach, when I was younger, I didn't like for the girls to wear headphones in the van on the way to the golf course. I wanted them to interact as a team. I felt like they were being rude, shutting each other out, whatever it is. But as I've gotten older, I've learned each player needs to be responsible for creating their own bubble. And I need to give them the freedom to do that. And they need to give each other the freedom to do that. And so that's one of the ways that I feel like I've changed a little bit as I've gotten older. that, just a little bit more individuality in that sense. So go ahead with the questions.
Well, that's a great point. Thanks for the follow-up. Andrew, then Austin, then Alden.
Yep. Hi, Coach Hester. I just wanted to know, I know with a lot of sports, like team chemistry is kind of vital to the team success. And you kind of touched on it already that golf is more of an individual sport. And so it's unique in that sense. But how would you say that your team's chemistry, especially this past year, has kind of had an impact on the success of your team, like kind of both on and off the course?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, so we went through something 3 years ago, where we, long story short, my best player on the team had been my best player for the last couple of years, had to be dismissed from the team. And in most situations, that would create a vacuum in terms of talent, in terms of whatever else. And in this particular case, what it did was it created an opportunity for other people to step up, and it made us realize how much we appreciated what the members of the team were bringing to the table. And quite honestly, some of the characteristics that this young lady had were really taking away from that. And unfortunately, as a coach, like, you don't know or see a lot of what happens within your team, but when there's a factor that's removed, all of a sudden you become aware. And I would say it really was a wake-up call to the players on our team of what it looked like to be a good teammate and what it looked like to sometimes not be a good teammate. And at the end of the day, like, no one person's going to be bigger than our team. So we learned through a pretty much a low point in our program. As a coach, like, I don't ever want to give up on a player. I don't ever want to lose a player. And in this particular situation, I didn't have a choice, but we learned what it looked like to create a great culture by seeing how, in some ways, the culture was hurt. And our players really learned a lot in that experience. And through that, they all became a better teammate. And, so you go through hard times sometimes, but, we always learn more in the challenges and in the hard times than we do in the good times. And that was a huge learning experience for our team. And the girls, really, they didn't waste that pain. It was hard on our group. You have a small team and one person's out of here, and like, it hurt. And it was hard, but our kids didn't waste that pain, and they really learned from it, and they learned how to be great teammates. And so our culture wouldn't be where it is without going through a negative to get to the positive end of it. But they love and serve each other and care about each other. And it's because they have some psychological safety with one another. Everyone is heard, feels heard. And that's really, as coaches, the environment that we've done our best to try to create.
Hi, Coach Hester. My name is Austin Randall, and I was wondering, like, what are some tactics for, like, you use for your interviews and stuff like that? Because going back to your bio, I heard that you are good at interviewing. So, like, I was wondering, what are some tactics that you could give us?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I feel as though I've always tried to be very authentic and honest in my interviews. And the one time I didn't get the job was when I was the assistant at Georgia and I was interviewing for the head job, and I had to talk myself into feeling prepared. Because ultimately I wasn't prepared for that job. I was 26 years old, one of the best jobs in the country. And, I think that like, when I interviewed here at Clemson, ultimately part of me didn't want the job, but I did want them to understand how hard of a job it was going to be to turn it around. So I was very honest. Like, Dan Radakovich was the athletic director at the time, and I just said, this is not going to be a quick fix. And if you're looking for a quick fix, I'm not your person. Now, this was before the transfer portal, but I still don't think that there's a quick fix. As a matter of fact, I have a theory, and now I think it's confirmed, that it takes 7 years to change the culture of a program. Because at 7 years, that means the players that you've recruited are helping you recruit. And when those new players come in, it's the players who are saying, this is how we do things. It's not the coaches saying, this is what we do here at Clemson. It's the players that are living it, that are breathing it, that are doing it, that are hosting these recruits when they come in. So, you know, and I actually shared that with Dan when I got here. No coach gets 7 years on their contract right out of the boat. Like, they just don't. But I did let him know that that was my theory. And if he wanted a quick fix, I wasn't going to be it. I'm a rules follower. I do things by the book. I'm not going to have a lot of violations, but that means it's going to take a little longer, and I'm going to try to build the right culture. And fortunately for me, this is not necessarily the case in football and basketball. But most ADs just want the golf coach to run a clean program. He doesn't want parents calling him, which I totally get. So I've always made a point to develop strong relationships with the parents. I have a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week policy, totally open door policy with parents, with players, especially when I lose a player. Like, when I don't get a player in the recruiting process, I make sure not to burn any bridges. And so in each case, I think I had a lot of people call on my behalf. So I was able to just be honest and answer the questions with clarity, not overpromise. I think that's a huge thing in the world, not just college athletics, but I always make an effort to underpromise and overdeliver. And I think people can trust that, right? Like, you know, you don't want to be an overpromiser and then you're scrambling and then you're, you know, it's hard to get to where you need to be from there. So, honest, authentic, and I typically would underpromise. So I'm not sure if that's the best answer, but that's my answer.
Hello, Coach Hester. Thank you for meeting with us today, and a happy belated birthday. I'm interested to hear that as a head coach, do you think the way that you react to loss/failure, or the way that you react to like a win or success, is more important for the team moving forward? And throughout your career, has the way that you've handled both of those changed?
That's a good question. Well, in our sport, you lose a lot more than you win. So I would say I'm probably a pretty decent loser, because if you play golf long enough, you're pretty much accustomed to losing. Winning, I'm actually probably more uncomfortable with, because it's really, we don't talk a lot about winning. We talk about trying to get better in the little things, 1% better every day. When we do goal setting with our players, we don't talk a lot about winning. Even while we're at golf tournaments, we just talk about trying to get better, trying to learn, trying to improve. And so winning and losing are not really part of our regular vernacular, but I would say, I would much rather those players hoist a trophy than me hoist it. We celebrate winnings as a group. And when we aren't as successful as we would like to be at a tournament or whatnot, then we talk about how we can get better. But golf is a game of sportsmanship. And so there's not a ton of like, rah, 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 I kicked your ass, or, like throwing your visor down, it's just, but disappointments in everyday activities. I do try to be a really clear communicator in those things. Like, for instance, we'll take 5 players to a tournament, so 3 players aren't going to get to go. And how you handle those 3 players, I think, is really important, that they still have value. But when you're not getting to travel, you're doing all the hard stuff. You're not getting to do the fun stuff. I think it's really important to make sure that everyone knows like their value is in who they are, and golf is something that we do. It's not who we are. Like nothing that we do is life or death. It's college athletics, and we want to just keep getting better. So hopefully in the overall scheme of things, I'm able to teach my players that winning is great and losing sucks, but we handle both with grace, and we use all of them to try to figure out how to get better. So I'm not sure that we're just not a real public sport. Like we don't get a ton of attention, so it's not like there's a lot of quotes out there or whatnot, but we all encourage being a good sport. Golf is such a humbling game. I mean, even just within the same hole, you can hit a great shot and then miss a 2-footer. Like it's just so how each of them handle those individual things, and then my response to it, I think, is something that we learn even just in the recruiting process. So we just try to be consistent more than anything there.
All right, we got about 10 minutes left, and a bunch of hands have gone up. And so I just encourage you for our next Chalk Talk, get your hands up sooner, because some of you probably won't get a chance on this one. But we've got Steven, then Sydney Brown, then Jalen, and Michelle. Those are our next 4.
Hey, Coach, Steven here. Just a quick question. So how often do you collaborate with your team outside of practice? And how have you seen the collaboration with your team really impact their play and their overall attitudes?
I mean, collaboration, I don't know. That's probably we text constantly. We have a group text. I would send them a message in the summer, like, send me a picture of what you're doing right now. Like, we're a pretty tight group. And our group in particular does a lot together away from the golf course, without me and without my assistant, which I think is great. Like ultimately, we're just trying to create that environment so where they are comfortable doing things together. But I feel like we are in constant communication with each other. Like for instance, I do really try to value their time and not communicate with them at a time that, like for instance, during the football game. I know they're watching the football game. I'm not going to send them I'm also watching the football game. But even like in the evenings, I try not to send them a reminder about something unless it's really important that I do so. But like we lost out on a recruit that our team just really enjoyed and felt like would be a great member of our team. And so I didn't send them that on Thursday night. It was one of our kids' 21st birthday. And the dad had taken the whole team out to dinner. And I was afraid they might see it on social media. But I was like, you know what? I'd rather them see it on social media than me to give them bad news while I know they're all out to dinner having fun. And so I just think we are in constant communication. I think I think that there's some of them I have a different relationship with. There's one in particular who's going through a really hard time right now. And so every morning during my quiet time, I'll send her a Bible verse just to let her know I'm thinking about her and praying about her. I don't do that with everybody on our team. I do that with this one kid in particular, but then with another kid, I do something else. So the goal for me is to build individual relationships. And that might be going out to coffee with one at this time or going to lunch with another. But I do believe that if there's ever a problem with one of the players on my team, like we're not getting along, there's friction, whatever, as the leader, it's up to me to do my best to repair that relationship. Even if the player is acting out, not doing what they're supposed to, it's still like my job to lead up and to help them through that. And your human nature is like, whatever, she's not doing what she needs to. I'm not olive branching this one. Like she just needs some time. But what I've found is that that's not necessarily what I need to do. So I think it's not all about me, but it is important that I help all of the relationships individually. And I think my assistant does the same. It's just part of what our team does.
Coach, hearing all your it's really cool being friends. And I think the big thing I guess I have for you is between the Clemson and how also seeing your family and it's not at all. It's like you have to you
Hey,
seem very
Sydney, I think
Yeah.
I think we're having a hard time hearing you. Am I the only one? And
Oh,
Coach,
really?
yeah, Coach, can you hear her?
No, it's like in and out a little bit.
You can walk in
Okay.
here. Sid. We're in the same building if you want to ask your question. And let's go ahead and let Jalen go next.
Yeah, so hey coach, how you doing? Happy belated birthday as well.
Thanks.
But I just wanted to ask you, you mentioned earlier that you had like some blind spots and biases. I just wanted to know like what made you aware of those things and how did you go about fixing them?
That's a great question. And I would say, so I was a part of this 8-week program called Coaching the Whole Athlete. And like the first 3 weeks, I totally had a wall up. Like, this is stupid. I don't need to be doing this. I don't have time for this. But we were forced to ask questions and to really look at, who we are and why we do things the way that we do them. And like thinking back to even just me as a young female student athlete, I came to realize that, for instance, I grew up at a golf course playing golf at a place where women weren't really welcome, especially on the weekends. And not only that, there were also no Blacks that were members. And that because of my experiences of not being, like I went to a small private school in Middle Georgia where everybody looked like me. I realized that my way of trying to embrace diversity was by treating people the same. Well, I have a good friend. Y'all might know Reggie Pleasant. His wife, Jessica, is a good friend of mine. And she's like, no, that's not what you do. We want to celebrate our differences. And I really appreciated her telling me that. So it's taken this like really deep dive into even just my childhood to understand that that diversity, equity, inclusion isn't about making everybody feel the same. It's about, like valuing what makes us different. And so, like, for instance, we went through an exercise on our team where everybody brought in an artifact that was symbolic of them or their family or their home or something, and they got to share it with the group. And we also, like at Christmas time, we have a dinner at our house and we all go around and we talk about what our family tradition is with the holiday. Because not everybody's is the same. Not everybody needs to celebrate Christmas the way I celebrate Christmas. So that's how and I'm going to continue to like uncover these understandings of my background and my biases and how I see things and why I see them that way, and how I can understand and appreciate what's different about other people's experiences. Because mine was very unique, just like everyone else's here is. And what makes us different is actually what's exciting about the world, in my opinion. But in our sport, we don't have a lot of diversity. We do have some international players, but largely middle to upper income, Caucasian, similar backgrounds, and not everyone, but most. And so we as a team need to do a better job of embracing our differences and appreciating them versus just making everybody look the same. So I don't know that I did that justice, but that's sort of the short answer.
Okay, appreciate you.
All right, Sid's here. She's gonna bring us home. Last question. Hang on,
oh,
sorry.
sorry.
Habit.
So you talked about your journey, kind of getting here to Clemson and how you're very intentional about pouring into your players, but you're also a mom and a wife. What are some ways you kind of take care of yourself so that you're able to be better present for everyone around you? Because I feel like that's just a typical role for a mom and a coach, is you're the ultimate caretaker and mentor.
That's a great question. So self-care is a huge part of what I learned about this summer and the importance of it. And we got this stupid Whoop band that tells you how little sleep you get and how much you need. So I'm trying to do a better job of sleeping more. I've been intentional about that in particular. I go to CrossFit every morning that I'm here at 5:30 in the morning, which is like the one thing that I do for myself. Like I really enjoy it and love it. And I've also tried to so part of that whole class this summer was the importance of journaling and internal thought and processing. And like, I'm not good at that. I'm a doer. I'm a fixer. And if I'm not doing something, if I'm just being, I feel like I'm not doing. And what I learned was I couldn't get to the answers to my questions unless I learned how to be with myself in my thoughts, in my journaling. And so I've really tried to do a better job of quieting my mind, doing some meditation, sleeping more. Like recovery is a word of your generation, not mine. Like, and I'm not very good at it, but I'm working on it. I'm trying to do a better job so that I can be more present with my players and I can be more intentional. Like these are things that are hard for me. And I learned exactly how hard they were by doing them and being so uncomfortable the first 3 or 4 weeks, the first half of that course. I was just so uncomfortable. But I'm trying to get better at it. So I think you do have to prioritize. But that's where I am with it. I'm trying to sleep more. And I do my CrossFit because if I don't, I'm probably not much fun to be around because I got to get rid of some of that energy. But the meditation and the journaling, if you guys can learn to do it at your age, it won't be so hard when you're my age. So I want to really encourage you to get comfortable with yourself and your thoughts, asking yourself hard questions and coming to the answers that are real, not just checking a box when you go through a class like this.
So you guys, you heard it here, your leadership journal assignment, your story assignment, and the gender equality class. These are important skills to acquire now. I can say this mom was in bed at 8:30 last night after taking a melatonin. So yes, sleep. Guys, this was a great first talk. Kelley, thank you so much for being here and sharing just not like your experience and your career, but also like what you're actually pursuing in your life right now. You know, like you shared stuff like personal stuff, and we really appreciate it. I will be posting grades for this as soon as we get off here. And if y'all need anything, just holler at me. But let's get the little clap for Coach Hester. Go Tigers.
You guys were awesome. Thank you so much for being attentive and asking questions. I appreciate it. I know you get a grade for it, but you ask great questions. Thank you.
Yep. Great questions. Really insightful. You might be learning stuff. That's awesome. All right. Bye, everybody.